The best way to deal with the threat of an obsidian dragon is to kill it before it has a chance to reach maximum potential. And if that's not an option, maybe consider, I don't know, time travel?
The concepts of time travel and chronomancy have captivated storytellers and game designers for decades, offering unique narrative possibilities and complex mechanical challenges in role-playing games. Game designers have explored a wide spectrum of approaches to integrating temporal mechanics, ranging from intricate simulations of causality to narrative-driven alterations of history. Welcome to the complete guide to time. Settle back, grab yourself a tasty beverage. It's time to get deeply nerdy. Dungeons & Dragons, across its many editions, has consistently engaged with the concept of time travel and chronomancy, evolving its interpretations from basic artifact effects to intricate magical traditions. The seeds of time travel in D&D were sown early, with artifacts like the Machine of Lum the Mad, allowing characters to be whisked to other times and planes. In these early stages, time was treated simply as another plane of existence, a concept that provided a foundational, if loosely defined, framework for temporal displacement. The time stop spell became a staple, though it functioned as a personal acceleration rather than true time travel. Deities such as Libellus Enrath and Kronos were depicted with the power to age or de-age mortals. However, the most comprehensive treatment of time travel came with the AD&D 2nd edition Chronomancer supplement. This seminal work introduced dedicated classes, temporal monsters like Temporal Dogs, Chronivores, and Time Elementals, hazards and planar regions such as the Temporal Prime, establishing a rich framework for chronomancy within D&D. Several 1st edition AD&D modules hinted at or directly incorporated temporal oddities. Dungeon Land and the Land Beyond the Magic Mirror featured dreamlike settings where time behaved strangely. Isle of the Ape introduced time dilation fields that could significantly age characters. The Rod of 7 Parts campaign included stasis vaults that trapped non-player characters for centuries, hinting at temporal displacement, and Castle Amber featured strong literary hints of past and future bleed-through, adding a temporal mystery. The Immortals set for D&D Basic explicitly allowed Immortals to travel through and manipulate time, granting them power over entire epochs. The Hollow World box set featured time bubbles, created by the spell of preservation, preserving ancient civilizations in a state of localized cultural stasis. The Wrath of the Immortals metaplot also featured large-scale cosmological events that altered the timeline. Time travel became more explicit in settings like the Forgotten Realms, often linked to Mystra and the cataclysmic Time of Troubles. Novels depicted localized time freezes and temporal feedback. The Cormanther Empire of the Elves supplement detailed Mythals, magical structures capable of altering local timelines. Notably, the Haste spell in this era famously aged characters by several years, a tangible consequence of temporal magic. The Manual of the Planes for 3rd edition formalized time traits for planes such as fast time or slow time, erratic time, and timeless regions, allowing for varied temporal conditions across the multiverse. While time stop remained personal, Psionics introduced time regression, a truly game-changing ability that allowed the Manifestor to rewind one full round, effectively erasing recent consequences. This was one of the few direct mechanical rewinds available in D&D's rule set. In the 4th edition, time manipulation was often framed through a fate-based destiny lens. Entities like the Raven Queen, Vecna, and the Inevitables regulated timelines. Mechanically, some epic tier powers allowed players to reset encounters or redo turns, functioning as narrative rewinds rather than literal time travel. 5th edition approaches time travel with caution, often recommending DMs treat alterations as leading to alternate realities. However, new mechanics provide robust temporal abilities, such as the Foresight spell, which allows for timeline peeking, granting glimpses into potential futures and Dunamancy spells were introduced in Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, and later refined in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Dunamancy includes spells like Gift of Alacrity, Temporal Shunt, and Time Ravage, which ages creatures significantly, serving as 5e's primary vehicle for Chronomancy. The Chronurgy wizard, also from Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, is a wizard subclass specializing in manipulating temporal anchors, delaying outcomes and forcing rerolls by subtly adjusting their position within the ongoing timeline. The Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden Adventure features the ancient Netherese city of Ythryn, frozen in time, and again in Wildmount lore, Luxon beacons facilitate reincarnation across timeline loops, a form of metaphysical time travel via rebirth. In D&D Cosmology, the material plane generally experiences linear time. However, many extraplanar realms can feature altered temporal flows. While a specific plane of time or temporal plane is less frequently detailed in official sources, it is often theorized as the origin or dwelling place for time manipulating entities. Concepts like the ethereal plane or certain demiplanes can exhibit temporal anomalies, and the Manual of the Planes describes the plane of time within the Astral Sea as a conceptual dimension where travelers might experience time dilation. The Chronomancer accessory for AD&D 2nd edition introduced Chronals, elemental-like beings that are guarding temporal rifts, hinting at a more structured temporal dimension. There is a big problem with getting access to the plane of time for mortal beings. Even if one can establish a planar gate, in all instances it just seems to activate and instantly vanish. The answer for this is obvious when you think about it. That gateway will form a connection, but because of the nature of the plane of time, it will only link to the prime material plane in that specific moment in the timeline. Everything else just moves ahead as per usual with the immense current of time. And the portal is like an anchor thrown over the side of the ship with nothing tethering it to the ship. See you later, it's now located in the past. Good luck finding a way back to get to it. So, to use the portal, one must also halt the flow of time in that location via a time stop spell at the exact moment the portal link is created. It's not an easy thing to do and can result in a large crater where it seems like everything just got disintegrated in an instant, torn free of the present and hurled into the void. Now it's time for our first bit of deep D&D lore, all the way back to the 1st edition Manual of the Planes, where we learn of the specifics of subjective time versus true time. It's not actually that complicated. True time is a being's personal perception of the passage of time. It tends to never vary on any prime material plane. True time governs all actions, movement, spellcasting, combat and such, while subjective time can alter longer-term things such as hunger and thirst, the need for regular sleep, and the duration of lingering spell effects, poisons, potions, the effects of paralysis, aging, and so on. So true time is of the moment, and subjective time is extended or longer-term things. This is why you can move around normally in the astral or ethereal plane, but you won't need to sleep or eat. In fact, you still do, but subjective time makes those processes very, very slow. We actually have the exact ratio for these planes, so our first bit of deep lore you won't find in any modern editions of the game. In the ethereal plane, 10 true rounds pass for every 1 subjective round. In the inner elemental planes, 1 true round passes for every 2 subjective rounds. In the astral plane, an enormous 170 true days pass for every 1 subjective round. In most of the conceptual outer planes of the Great Wheel, true time and subjective times are usually equal. So in the deep ethereal, a potion's effects last 10 times as long, but will speed back up to match true time when passing from the deep ethereal into the border ethereal. On the plane of fire in the city of brass, you can get intoxicated from alcohol twice as fast. Still, it will only last half as long, and in the astral plane, 1,000 years of true time pass for every 1 day of subjective time, which is why it's a great place to flee to if you get badly poisoned or cursed, as the effects slow to a virtual stop. though there are many exceptions related to the mental and spiritual nature of the plane. So things like a sleep spell lasts the same amount of time. Still, a potion of sleep will be effective for 170 days because it's a metabolic rather than a mental effect, if you see how that works. While one could say that the plane of time is a demi-plane within the deep ethereal, like the plane of shadow or the plane of imprisonment, or the countless others created by gods and powers and wizards and such, it's not really the same thing. And while we call the native inhabitants time elementals, the plane of time is not one of the inner elemental planes, so they are not really elementals at all. But let's not split hairs over it. The plane of time is detached from the cosmic flow because time is more like a subjective direction there. The plane exists in a higher dimensional state, which is easier demonstrated than explained. So let's go there, shall we? Thankfully, we can spend a few immortal power points and use immortal powers to access and perceive the full details of the plane, which I'll guide you through while keeping you safe and returning you to the material plane after. Safe, if not fully mentally sound. Let's open a planar portal and stop time simultaneously. The portal, as you can see, is a golden hue with luminous motes, like a lava lamp with glitter in it. Stepping through is a disconcerting feeling as you have a lurch in a sense you barely recognize you have, as the current of time you've been riding along your entire life is suddenly decelerated, like you just stepped off a moving escalator. Try not to lose your lunch, and I warn you, it will feel worse when we get back to the material plane. Normally, your senses would only allow you to detect your own time stream and alternate time streams that branch off from its infinite lines. And yes, to begin with, they do look like bright timelines. This is because a being native to the prime material plane and such is locked into whatever plane they came from. Chronomancers, though skilled in the magic of time manipulation, usually only interact with the plane at this perceptual level. But we can adjust that by expending some power points and break the lock. This is going to be a very costly tour, as those power points are essentially experience levels that immortals accumulate relatively slowly and are essential in their ranking and influence within the sphere's hierarchy. But that's lore for immortals and no concern of yours today. Now, we should be able to see the full extent of this place, which we're going to call the Temporal Prime. Instead of all those time streams being separated by vast bluish-grey, misty, smoky stuff, we can now see that all of them are, in fact, bunched together in a very orderly way. Don't try to interact with any of those time streams yet. If you touch one that you are not native to, the time current difference could rip you apart in a very spectacular and exotic way, instantly. So that would not be good. Would be bad. We are now standing less than an inch from the surface of what seems like mostly featureless infinite flat plain with a black sky overhead and silvery pale surface beneath our feet. This is all illuminated by a dull red light with no discernible source. Looking down at the ground, it's now a vast plain of parched earth cut with a never-ending array of parallel lines. These grooves appear no more than an inch deep, as if it's the biggest vinyl record you could imagine. But this is still not the full scope of the Temporal Prime, so brace yourself. I need to elevate your senses well beyond the capabilities of mortal forms of life, so you can see four-dimensionally. Alright, now when we look up, we can see the full extent of the Temporal Prime and the homes of the beings who many mistakenly call time elementals. The actual time elementals that can appear on the plane are formless little clouds of coppery vapor and sparkling dust about 5 feet in diameter, which can spray a mist from crude limbs that they form and reach out with. The mist making contact with the living being will cause severe and rapid aging. If we're lucky, we might spot a Chronomancer show up and interact with their time stream. If we're less lucky, we will be spotted by the time elementals, whose proper title is time dimensionals, and we're bound to stir up some native critters in the areas we explore. Maybe some time dogs or temporal spiders. We shall chat about them in a moment. Oh, looking up, the sky is not exactly black and featureless anymore, and the red light has shifted into a spectrum of hues that is quite spectacular, but not as impressive as that massive glowing infinity symbol up there. It's deceptive how far off it is because of how immense its size is. I don't know much about it, but I have a theory I'll get into later. Also filling this brilliant spectrum of tones are the structures of the time-dimensional elementals and the time Flayers, who are much more humanoid-looking beings described as tall, stark white figures wearing robes of silver and black. Their eyes are sparkling fire, and they usually carry around a very fine greatsword. You may possibly have seen one of them on the Astral Plane or the Ethereal Plane, and sometimes in the inner nexus of Sigil, the City of Doors. Nobody knows why the Time Players seem to live alongside the Time Elementals and yet detest them so much that they attack each other on sight. So, look, you can look up at that zone, but we can't go there. It would just really mess up your linear sensibilities very badly. The important note to take away is that the Time Flayers only ever show up on the prime material plane when there is a tear in the time stream, and they get pulled through, which they also hate and will seek to get back home as soon as possible. If you do get into a fight with them, they have a tactic where they target the most powerful enemy, touch them, and shunt them about a minute into the future, which really sucks in the middle of combat, because you have to sit there twiddling your thumbs while your friends are getting sliced and diced in your recent past. A creature killed by a Time Flayer in combat is not just dead, it's unmade, erased from the very fabric of time. Nobody will remember they existed, and yet people will vaguely recall someone being responsible for the stuff the victim did in the past. They'll just not be able to remember who, at all, that was. Not even a wish spell can restore such a victim, which makes it one of the rare forms of permanent and irreversible dooms in the D&D multiverse that will require the direct intervention of a god to restore them to reality. Forget trying to sneak up on a Time Player. They can see a few moments in the future. They can also move or appear to move by folding space around them, creating an effect just like that of the Displacer Beast. And they are immune to all time-related spells. Plus, they are immortal, of course. They never age, but they can be killed. They can also teleport around and shift into a high-dimensional state to escape sticky situations. There is a point in higher dimensions that even Immortals are blocked from going any further, thanks to the Great Old Ones essentially sealing those dimensions off behind a vortex only they have control of, or can move themselves or other beings through in either direction, such as direction has any meaning at that level. You can see why mortals need an intelligence of 17 and a wisdom of 16 minimum even to learn Chronomancy and interact with this place. Those who do learn the art are notoriously secretive about it, and none of them is, as far as I know, even aware of what we are about to explore. Just to be clear about my sources for this info, it's an amalgam of the information from both the first edition Monster Manual 2, which was later included in the Complete Tome of Horrors by Necromancer Games, and of course Planescape Chronomancer, which is an excellent book that doesn't get the credit it deserves. Time Elementals come in different strata of power here. It's hard to tell which type you're dealing with, but there are common, noble, and royal Time Elementals. Dragons, they are, I would never say scared of, but let's say very wary of ever running into Time Elementals due to the fact that Elementals can advance the Dragon's Age category without all of the associated advancement in their growth and power. So the dragon will never reach full potential unless they reverse the effect with some seriously rare magic. Dragons won't, I think, ever venture into the plane of time on purpose. They're just not as stupid. I mean, as curious and bold as you or I. Oh, one more thing about the plane of time. When anyone arrives here from the Prime, they always seem to arrive near the middle of their personal timeline. Not precisely in the middle, but close. A theory for that related to the massive glowing infinity symbol way up there. The Time Elementals seem so interested in it. The Time Elementals dwell in massive palaces formed of vaguely suggested geometries that fill the entire plane, moving about totally invisible to beings incapable of seeing and thinking in the fourth dimension. Fighting a Time Elemental is similar to fighting a Time Flayer. It's not a fun experience and very confusing. A Time Elemental exists in several other dimensions at any given time. It can bring up to 4 of these manifestations to its current locale to gain multiple attacks that round. Treat each manifestation as a separate Time Elemental with hit points equal to the Time Elemental's current hit points. Manifestation cannot use any of the spell abilities of the Time Elementals. A Time Elemental cannot have more than 4 manifestations present at one time, because each manifestation is part of the Time Elemental that called them. A successful attack on the Time Elemental or any of its manifestations deals an equal amount of damage to them all. Okay, my personal theory, and take this for what it's worth, is that the time elementals and flayers are responsible for maintaining the great infinity symbol up there, and it's that thing which is turning all the cogs and gears of the plane of Mechanus. And each time Mechanus reaches the middle part where the loops meet, that's what triggers the great march of the Modrons across all of the planes. But that's just my take on it. I am certain, though, that if anyone tries to mess with that symbol, they will be prevented from existing by the great old ones. So nobody ever does, because those people don't exist. What people? Never heard of them. If we want to interact with any point in time along the time stream, well, look down and concentrate. As a conceptual plane of existence, we move, enlarge, or reduce by concentration. So as you will note, the groove has expanded around us, and we're now inside it, like a huge valley. And the features of the prime material plane are now visible. It's all shades of stark white and black, like everything was carved from white stone, sharp definitions and contrasts. If we move down the valley of time, things will stutter from one moment to the next, like stop motion, stuttering teleports. It's not a smooth animation, but a series of frozen moments. The valley walls, if we move in their direction, will always be way over there. The prime material plane just rolls out in front of us as we move along. It can be slow and tedious to move this way without having some means to jump around across large distances. But we don't want to linger here too long. This is not a safe place to be, and we may encounter things even I have never heard of. So keep an eye out for any movement and warn me right away if you feel strangely sluggish and start to move slowly, as that may be a temporal predator snaring us in a web. Let's rise back up and out of here, and we don't want to go messing around with anything, and who knows what disruptions we could cause with even the most basic accident, like kicking something over or standing on a butterfly. Alright, other beings native to the plane of time are the Temporal Crawlers. A Temporal Crawler is a 6-foot-long, hairy grey spider with a large hourglass-shaped patch of silver fur dominating its back. Upon closer inspection, it appears that the hourglass is animated and that sand runs from one chamber to the other. The Temporal Crawler's mandibles seem to be constructed of silver and bounce light off of them. The creature's many eyes are bright red. Temporal Crawlers spin webs to catch creatures. Once a victim enters the web, it must save or be affected by a slow spell. The spider paralyzes its prey with its bite for one round. They usually exist on the prime material plane, but some must have gotten here via temporal incidents and somehow managed to survive, though I've no idea why, as there's not much here for them to eat. The best source of creatures, lore, and spells and character classes associated with time and the plane of time is absolutely Planescape Chronomancer, so I'll just focus on the creatures and lore in there for a while. First up, we've got the Vortex spider, a unique variant of what were once phase spiders, who became trapped on the temporal plane and now only survive there. As the book says, Vortex spiders have kept their ancestors' basic shape, but are covered with a thin layer of chitin that can change colour to match their surroundings, though it is otherwise a blue-grey shade naturally. They build their huge webs as close as they can to time vortexes, and the spiders are large, about 12 feet long. One corner of the spider's web layer contains the remains of its victims, concealed from sight to avoid scaring off fresh victims. But vortex spiders are smart enough to use the body and treasure of a victim to lure the unwary into their trap. Their web spans about 50 feet, so not as large as a time vortex entry usually, and not sticky. It simply slows down the victim like the spell effect. Then they emerge from concealment to deliver a mortal bite with a deadly venom that can cause instant death. As mentioned, temporal vortexes, this is covered in Planescape Chronomancer, as well as maelstroms, which are large networks of vortex conduits clustering on specific time streams, which are also connected to different planes of existence in other worlds. The maelstroms have major anchor vortices identified by their 4 spiral patterns across their outer perimeters. The shape and number of these patterns and lines inform what sort of wormhole the vortex is, how much time it skips across, if it crosses into the same or different worlds, and such. There are also time storms. That is a subject related to disruptions and violations of some of the fundamental rules of time. I highly recommend going to Planescape Chronomancer sourcebook for that information, as it's a bit specific for this broad and general overview of the temporal plane and its ecology. Simply put, a vortex forms due to disturbances in the time stream, converging at least a couple of nexus points, often several, and they range in size based on how long they've been active. The connection between the nexus points allows the vortices to be used like wormholes, covering greater distances forwards and backwards in history. Distance is an illusion, of course, a trick played on mortal visitors from the prime material plane. In the plane of time, it's all about your mind. Like the character Morpheus said in The Matrix, do you think that's air that you're breathing? The astral plane is far removed from the inner planes. The only reason the outer planes are all located within them have normal temporal flow is because there are conceptual realms of living beings within the prime material planes. They're about as real as the matrix that Neo interacts with. So when on the ethereal plane you have an ethereal body, on the astral plane you have an astral body, your digital self, so to speak. In the outer planes, they often have their own specific rules and traits governing how the souls of the departed or living visitors appear, what they are made of, and how aware they are of what they were back in the prime material plane. Most magic items and artifacts require some material from the inner or outer planes to hold enchantments in the deep lore, and have extraordinary effects on the matter and living beings of the prime material plane because they're not fully real. They are part dream stuff, part belief and faith. They bypass the physics of the prime material plane in this way. This is probably where another channel would put some sort of sponsored advertising, but I'm not about that. I'm a self-funded channel. Speaking of which, some magic items that very much are real are my excellent mugs and t-shirts that you can get from my Fourthwall store. There's other merch on there as well, and also I've just published a RPG called Super Atomic, which you can pick up on Drive-Thru RPG. Print option will be available very soon. Okay, right back to it. More on magic items later in this video. We still have a lot of creatures to talk about, including a dragon of sorts. I mentioned Temporal Dogs. Much like the Phase Spider variants, Temporal Dogs are a highly evolved species that was once Blink Dogs. They're one of the few forms of life on the plane of time which are friendly towards wizards. Temporal Dogs look very similar to Blink Dogs, but are slightly smaller, and they prefer solitude rather than forming into packs socially. They form packs only when hunting down large and formidable prey, and otherwise subsist like many other creatures on a strange organism called Tempsynth. Kind of like the plankton of the plane of time, Tempsynth are harmless. They're a patch of what look like a cross between beeswax, fungus, and vegetables. It crawls along time streams in patches and feeds harmlessly on stray arcane energy naturally emanating from the time stream, like heat off a steam conduit, reproducing by merging and such. Temporal Dogs eat the stuff, as well as the Temporal Gliders and Vortex Spiders. Temporal Dogs are quite intelligent, have their own language of sorts, and understand the purpose of trade, even if they don't really need anything. Temporal Gliders look a lot like black manta rays without a tail. They move by mental power. The graceful, curving motion of their wingtips is related to the senses of the time stream they glide over closely, periodically vanishing in a cloud of mist smoke as they travel between the time streams of different planes, feeding on the temporal flow variance between the two. Do not try to ride a temporal glider, as the transition from one plane to another will certainly kill anyone riding one of them due to being torn to pieces by the difference. Next, we have a relatively simple creature, one of the most dangerous for visitors to the plane of time, the Chronovoid, an iridescent skinned ovoid blob of jelly. They can be huge conglomerations comprising of individual organisms, or more commonly a roaming group of 3 large ovoids. Chronovoids float along the time streams, letting the lines pass through them. There seems to be a relationship between them and the Tempsynth, which is not well understood. The Chronovoids do not harm the Tempsynth at all as they pass over the slowly moving blobs. When they detect beings from the prime material plane within 50 feet, they will attack them by attempting to absorb them into their mass. They're difficult to deal with due to their gelatinous form and ability to divide when attacked, a typical tactic of many oozes. They have quite a unique reaction to enchanted weapons though, with the amount of damage taken directly proportionate to how strongly enchanted the weapon is, which I wish is how most creatures reacted to being harmed by enchanted objects rather than simply being immune to anything non-magical. They take more and more damage the more +1s the weapon has. Putting it simply, a +1 stabby stick will whittle them down slowly, while a +3 pointy stick will make short work of them in a rather messy fashion. This feels fundamentally right to me. Being engulfed by a chronovoid will rapidly age and disintegrate organic tissue, but things like gems, metal coins and things will linger, and enchanted objects can be lodged in them, unable to be digested by the creatures, because they need to be large enough to engulf prey to digest them. It's a constant battle to keep chopping them into smaller ovoids, as they will keep attempting to merge back into larger ovoids. So fighting them in narrow confines or places where they can get behind cover or block and protect each other as they do this is a bad tactical idea. Either fight them out in the open or leave the area is my advice. Next we have the Tether Beast. The Tether Beast is commonly misidentified as a dragon native to Temporal Prime, though anatomically it closely resembles an elongated behir. Its body is long and serpentine, bearing multiple pairs of legs set irregularly along its length. Their limbs are significantly longer than a behir's, but are usually folded tight back against the body, creating the misleading impression of a limited reach. The back and legs are covered in iridescent scales that catch the plane's shifting light, while the underside lacks such armor and is protected by a softer black hide. The head is reptilian, with a short snout and a mouth filled with narrow dagger-like teeth. Tether Beasts are endemic to Temporal Prime and do not establish lairs. Individuals are always in motion. They are most frequently encountered in pairs. When a third is present, it's usually a juvenile offspring of the two larger beasts. The largest member of a group stores accumulated valuables in several concealed pouches within the softer tissues of the underside. Objects of obvious value or magical items too large to conceal are dragged along in a single claw. Approximately 1 in 10 Tether Beasts can activate a magic item, though the limb holding such an object becomes unusable for an attack or movement. Although capable of independent movement across the plane, Tether Beasts almost always travel by crawling along the Timestreams, maintaining contact with at least 4 claws wrapped around a silver cable. Individuals are occasionally observed biting or gnawing at Timestreams. No measurable damage to the Timestream or its owner has been recorded, though Chronomancers report a brief chilling sensation at the moment of contact. The Tether Beast occupies the apex predatory niche on Temporal Prime. It attacks and consumes nearly anything encountered, including lesser native entities and Temporal Gliders. Chronomancers appear to be the favoured prey, though. No natural predators are known, and only adventurers are recorded as having slain them. A Tether Beast that detects the silver mist trail of a traveller will follow until the trail dissipates or the traveller is located. In combat, Tether Beasts prefer ambush, but will engage regardless of circumstance. They maintain their grip on a Timestream with several rear claws while attacking with the remaining limbs in their bite. They can strike in any direction, and the reach of their forelimbs brings them into melee range, even against opponents using long weapons. If foes try to stay just beyond reach, the creature braces with its rear claws and extends the forward half of its body outward, delivering multiple attacks in a single lunging motion. Attempts to force the creature to release a Timestream are rarely effective. Whether successful or not, such actions draw the beast's full attention, including an immediate strike from the limb that was freed. After the first round of combat, if the Tether Beast judges it's not prevailing, it may employ a breath weapon of limited range against a single target. The exhalation resembles the blue-grey mist of the Temporal Prime and accelerates the victim's aging, of course. Failure to resist results in a death by extreme aging, leaving only dust. Success still causes significant aging. This ability is used effectively no more than once every several rounds. They're also undead, common to the plane of time, called Temporal Stalkers. Many of them were once Chronomancers who perished on the plane, and the Stalkers are strictly confined to the Temporal Prime and will be destroyed if they try to venture into a Prime material plane. They are formidably intelligent, and they hate linear living beings, particularly Chronomancers. The Chronomancers have not exterminated these horrors because they believe they naturally weed out other Chronomancers who are too stupid to be trusted with manipulating time, and the Stalkers tend to cull that group very efficiently. They also have that old school form of attack called level drain, which has always been one of the nastiest forms of undead energy draining attacks. There are not just temporal elementals, there's also a type of creature called a chronomental. These are from the Tome of Beasts number 1, and it is stated that the first chronomentals were forged from extra time left over from the beginning of the universe. Many served as shock troopers in unfathomable wars between angels and fiends, or gods and their ancient titans. Most were lost between seconds or abandoned adrift in the astral plane or the void between the stars. Lovely. Nice of the ancient powers to leave all their nightmare monsters and reality-rending ordnance just lying around the multiverse like unexploded landmines, isn't it? How do you fight a creature made of leftover scraps of time, you ask? My friend, this is Dungeons & Dragons. You just hit them with an enchanted pointy stick, of course. Otherwise, they are immune to any physical damage, poison, exhaustion, being grappled, paralyzed, petrified, restrained, being knocked unconscious. You know, the usual. However, most energy damage types tend to work well enough. A chronomental is hard to detect. They often appear as a large humanoid-shaped gap in the air, which seems to be a window to deep star-filled space, which then shifts via rainbow hues as it Doppler shifts, then pulses with a bright light, strobing in and out of existence. What you're looking at is the birth, life, and death of the universe cycling endlessly from start to finish, over and over rapidly. It's disconcerting. Speaking of gods and the multiverse, let's take a closer look at the powers who protect the time streams aside from native inhabitants, and some notes from Planescape Chronomancer on the various main world settings of Dungeons & Dragons. Since my main focus is the world of Toril and the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, I'll quote the entire passage on it from the Planescape Chronomancer book. Toril has many powerful forces devoted to keeping its history intact. Elminster, Kelvin Aronson, the Seven Sisters, and many other powerful wizards have been granted certain undefined powers by Mystra, goddess of magic, to prevent chronomantic spells from working in their vicinities. Supernatural or priestly agents of Dania and Ogma, Toril's gods of history, so to speak, are believed to be able to follow a chronomancer's trail and undo damage they have done. Finally, a chronomancer who seriously disrupts history is likely to encounter an avatar of the most directly involved god, which will likely result in the abrupt termination of that chronomancer's life. Other than this, chronomancers are known to make limited, low-key time travel trips in Faerun, Karatur, Zakara, and Maztica. Native chronomancers are usually devout followers of both a deity of magic like Mystra and a deity of time or history, for example Dania or Ogma, serving as historians and information collectors. Ancient empires such as Netheril, Rorin, Malharund, Narfel, Ruamathar, and Cormanther might have known of chronomancy or time travel, though this did not prevent their fall. Most wizards here refer to temporal prime as the plane or demiplane of time. Athos, the world of Dark Sun setting, allows no time travel at all. Earth, the world of the Greyhawk campaign setting, has a mysterious group called the Monitors of Infinity, set to be drawn from across time, who guard that world's timeline. Two quasi-deities, Heward and Maryland, are probably chronomancers with powers from devices, psionics, or artifacts. The mad god Zagyig is also most likely a time traveler. Then there's Vecna, who would absolutely know a lot about chronomancy and be somewhat displeased with anyone else knowing about it. Kryn, the world of the Dragonlance campaign setting, is a complex case, as it has key moments and eras in its timeline that branch off into parallel alternate timelines, and venturing into one of those points can strand you in an alternate reality with no way to get back. The mage Rasslin has most likely explored time chronomancy and taken steps to protect himself against it, so be warned. Mystara, the world of D&D Basic, Hollowworld, Redsteel, and Blackmoor, is protected by the Immortals, of course. Chronomancy was known to the Wizards of Alphatia, but an Immortal wiped all that out. It may have been the Immortals, Rad and Raphael, defending an ancient secret connected to the radiance of Glantry. The Immortals are fairly tolerant of unobtrusive chronomancers, but will shunt them around critical events in history, and chronomancers with hostile intentions or bad reputations will find themselves destroyed quite promptly. For the multiverse at large, anyone attempting time travel in the outer or elemental planes is an extreme risk of attracting attention from gods and other powers. At best, they may be captured and interrogated for their secrets of powerful magic, but that is rarely the case with deities. They will just snuff out Chronomancers when they detect them. Do not try any Chronomancy in the City of Doors. The Lady of Pain does not like Chronomancy. The resident Bloods know this full well and will shun anyone who lets it be known that they have such knowledge, shortly before said individuals mysteriously vanish without a trace. Oh yes, do not attempt time travel in any of the demi-planes of dread, including Ravenloft, as the Dark Powers are watching. While it can be safe in specific places, you really have to know what you're doing, and that information is next to impossible to come by. That being said, there is one domain called Castle Forlorn where halls and doorways lead to other time periods, which Chronomancers would find incredibly useful. As you can see, the overall theme is secrecy, for very good reason. Chronomancers who are overly disruptive or reveal themselves can end up very dead very quickly. But considering the harm they can cause with this kind of magic, I can't say the powers and pantheons are not fully justified. Magic has a very, very long history on the world of Toril. From the primordial aboleth, a lot of the fundamentals of magic and the most mighty technology it has produced stem. It was their secrets that the Spellweavers took and developed into their great empire. When it fell and reshaped the multiverse, the reptilian Saruk rediscovered most of these secrets and created mighty artifacts such as the giant alien Athora stone under Thamount, said to be one of the pivotal anchors that helped the goddess Mystra stabilize the arcane weave. It's no coincidence that the amphibian Batraki Empire rediscovered the secrets of magical gateways, perhaps in search of other such artifacts, and eventually discovered the spawning stone within Limbo, transforming themselves into more of the chaotic species called the Slard. Giants and dragons rampaged across history for an age, and another great empire of avian-like creatures called the Aeri rose and were destroyed in the early centuries of that time. The elves brought incredibly powerful fey magic with them, but again, they fell after many brutal wars among their own kind and their sporadic conflicts with the orcs. Humans learned of the craft from the elves, and by rediscovering the ancient scrolls of the Saruk, their empire rose quickly and was very impressive, but fell even faster in a spectacular disaster caused by the hubris of one man and his cult of fellow archmages. In the current era of Toril, much of what is now lost and buried. Truly, forgotten realms lie below the surface of this land and sea, hidden enclaves and crumbling ruins. For every spell there is, 100 have been forgotten, waiting for rediscovery by the next great empire, whatever it may be. Chronomancy magic is detailed very well in the Planescape Chronomancer book. It includes 3 9th level spells, Major Paradox, Sever Lifeline, and Temporal Shell, which are very powerful indeed. I won't go over every specific spell here. I can say, just go grab the book. It's a must-have for Cosmic Adventures. The sourcebook informs us that time builds momentum as it moves forward, manifesting as potential and kinetic energy, a power that arcane arts can shape. Chronomancers turn time's momentum against itself, interrupting the flow, but that can only be taken so far, and the time stream will always attempt to correct itself. Time travel has been handled many different ways across fantasy and science fiction role-playing games, so I thought I would end today's exploration with a broad overview of methods and some examples from many different role-playing games and media, most of them are pretty obscure. Some games stick to fixed timelines, the kind where the past is already written and the characters are simply participating in events that must happen. You can interact with history, but anything you do somehow ends up supporting the established outcome. If you have someone who is historically recorded dead, it turns out that person you rescued wasn't actually the one you thought, or history books are wrong. So some other twist in the timeline never really changed. This is the history is immutable approach, which keeps paradoxes out of the game entirely and lets players feel powerful without breaking the world. Then there's the classic branching timeline system, where the moment you change an event, you fork reality into a new version of the world. The party returns to a future that reflects the impact, but somewhere out there in the prime is the timeline where they didn't meddle. This is the favourite of the multiverse-heavy campaigns because it ties neatly into parallel worlds, alternate selves, and all that good quantum weirdness. It's also extremely forgiving for GMs because nothing is ever truly broken, just shifted sideways. A cousin to that is the loop-closing timeline, where time travel creates cycles that must be resolved. Characters might discover that events they caused in the past are the very events that set the adventure in motion. You'll find this in stories where the time travel happens because it already happened. The perfect Ouroboros of narrative structure, snake eating its own tail. Players end up realizing that they were the mysterious figure in the old prophecy or the unseen hand in some ancient battle. Another approach is the chaotic paradox-embracing model. In this style, changing past events absolutely rewrites the present, sometimes instantly, sometimes gradually. Maybe characters feel memories shifting in their heads as the new future overwrites the old. Maybe the world ripples and glitches until everything settles. Sometimes the GM gets to rewrite character sheets, relationships, entire nations, and even metaphysics on the fly. It creates a very flexible but potentially volatile game space where the party is effectively sculpting the world as they go. In contrast, some systems go for the quantum-locked timeline where multiple possibilities exist until the characters themselves collapse them by choosing. Until the party interacts with the moment in time, it remains indeterminate. This lets the GM reweave history events dynamically depending on what the players want to investigate. It's like Schrodinger's campaign setting, real only when observed. They are also games where time travel is treated like a physical environment rather than a narrative device. The past, present, and future exist simultaneously, but at destinations with their own hazards, barriers, and terrain. Time becomes a kind of dungeon or wilderness. You can travel through it, fight creatures native to that time, or get stranded in temporal storms. This turns chronology into geography. Then you get games that treat time travel as an economy. Changing past events costs something. Energy, sanity, memories, or pieces of your own lifespan. The more drastic the alteration, the greater the cost. Sometimes the price is paid immediately, sometimes it accrues like debt, with time wardens coming to collect. This is ideal for campaigns where meddling with history is tempting but dangerous, encouraging careful, story-rich decision-making. Another common model is the protected timeline, where certain events are fixed points. No amount of intervention can alter them. Everything else is malleable. But these anchors hold the structure of the universe in place. The drama comes from the players trying to work around inevitable outcomes while still getting what they want. Some games use a meta-narrative approach in which time travel is less about physics and more about story agency. Characters can rewrite scenes, revisit encounters, or reframe outcomes because the game treats time like a narrative editing rather than a literal dimension. You can see this in more experimental or rules-light systems where the fun comes from collaborative storytelling rather than simulation. There are also settings where time travel is actually dimensional travel in disguise. Instead of moving along the timeline, you hop to worlds that represent different versions of historical events. The characters think they're in their own past, but really they're in a parallel reality that just looks like it. This protects the GM's core world while letting players engage with the fantasy of altering history. This is how I run all of my temporal campaigns, by the way. Some games rely on predestination paradoxes as a feature. Characters might find that attempts to prevent disaster end up causing it, or that a warning they send back to the past becomes the very mistake they were trying to avoid. These loops create a tight, satisfying structure when handled well, and give players the eerie sense that their characters are caught in a cosmic web of fate. A more comedic narrative style treats time travel as pure chaos. Characters bounce randomly through eras, each jump serving as a backdrop for a standalone encounter, the Bill and Ted's adventure. Continuity is irrelevant, cause and effect are barely existent, and the fun lies in the abrupt changes in tone and setting. Each jump is basically a random table with teeth. Another approach is the deterministic but editable model. The timeline is fixed until it isn't. Characters can change some aspect, but major events snap back unless changes are reinforced by further actions. It's like world history has elastic tension. It tries to revert unless the pressure to change it becomes great enough. Some systems enforce time police. bureaucracies, or cosmic forces that monitor and correct distortions. Characters either work for them or run from them. Time becomes a battlefield between factions, each trying to shape the future to their ideology. This lets the GM introduce recurring adversaries who appear anywhere, anywhen, and still feel consistent. A rare but interesting model is the subjective time approach, where each character's personal timeline is the only one that truly matters. You can meet older or younger versions of yourself, and they are effectively separate beings, but your own causal chain remains intact no matter what happens to alternate versions. This allows deeply personal arcs involving self-interaction, destiny, or the consequences of failing your own future self. Finally, some games treat time travel like spellcasting, limited, risky, and unreliable. You cast a ritual or use a device and the GM interprets the results. Maybe you hit the right era, or maybe you overshoot by centuries. Maybe the universe rejects your interference in subtle but or catastrophic ways. This creates suspense and prevents time travel from completely overwhelming the campaign. Okay, let's look at some examples. Palladium books, particularly the Transdimensional Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sourcebook, stands out for its profound and extensive exploration of time travel, parallel dimensions, and temporal entities. Starting in the 1980s, Palladium systems were among the first to introduce deep philosophical and mechanical treatments of time. The time travel rules and resources in that book are my personal favorites, with characters who build and operate time machines needing enormous intelligence scores to calculate the intense math and engineering required to even attempt time travel. It has expanded mutation tables with dinosaurs and even a method to mutate humans into their ultimate evolutionary state, basically floating powerfully psychic adult-sized babies with huge brains but atrophied and neotonized bodies that are quite freaky looking. Considered by many to be the most intricately detailed time travel RPG ever conceived, Continuum, role-playing in the Yet, introduces a personal timeline currency called Span. Characters operate within stable temporal cycles, and any deviation from the preordained actions create a frag, a paradox that can lead to being erased from existence by the Continuum's enforcements or mechanisms. The game frames time as a social contract, obligating characters to remember and adhere to their future actions, as if they've already occurred. This intricate system forces players to navigate causality with extreme care, making it a truly challenging and immersive temporal experience. That's the economy version of time travel. Getting really obscure in the archives, we have a game never actually publicly published. The thematic counterpart to Continuum, Narcissist, was envisaged as a game where characters actively sought to break causality by creating immutable zones in time where narrative logic could override physical laws, demonstrating a fascinating inversion of Continuum's strict rules. The indie comedy game Time and Temp humorously transforms time into a bureaucratic nightmare. Players take on the roles of office workers tasked with fixing temporal glitches. However, every correction often introduces new paradoxes, creating a cascading series of temporal distortions that escalate into temporal spaghetti. The game's brutal paradox tracking mechanics underscore the chaotic nature of temporal intervention. Time Lords by Greg Porter offers a minimalistic yet scientifically rigorous simulation of chronology. It emphasizes concepts like causal shielding, temporal inertia, and space-time anchoring, presenting time travel as a serious scientific endeavor. In stark contrast, the Time Master from Pace Setter adopts a pulpier tone, casting players as time cops, agents who safeguard history from malevolent forces like the Demorians. The system was notable for its early structured time police mechanics. While not strictly time travel, Chronica Feudalis allows players to retroactively reframe or reinterpret historical scenes as their characters' exploits are being reconstructed by future scribes, offering a unique form of timeline editing. Age of Atlantis explores time travel through reincarnation loops. Characters repeatedly experience the rise and fall of civilizations, retaining fragments of knowledge that influence subsequent incarnations and reshape geopolitics across generations. Tom Moldvay's Lords of Creation empowers high-level characters with time travel abilities as they ascend to godlike status. In Cosmology, rich with overlapping eras and genre shifts, it treats time travel as another form of planar traversal. Fringeworthy by Richard Tucholka blurs the lines between time and dimension. Its fringe system features nodes leading to alternate Earths, often with significant historical offsets, making temporal displacement a byproduct of dimensional exploration. It's the way I handle it. Lace and Steel, a romance and fencing RPG, incorporates a subtle time replay mechanic. Players can retell duels in flashback, influencing luck and outcomes, effectively rewinding and altering events within a defined narrative structure. In mystical World of Darkness games like Changeling the Lost and Wraith the Oblivion, temporal manipulation often occurs through dream realms or shadowlands. Keepers or specters can alter a character's past experiences, influencing their present, functioning as a narrative form of history rewriting rather than literal time travel. Polaris, the Tragic Knight RPG, allows players to rewrite scenes through ritualized negotiation. This mechanic often feels like chronal revision, emphasizing the game's theme of inevitable doom and the malleability of fate. In Amber Diceless, high-ranking patterned users can traverse anywhen within Shadow. This is explained not by physics, but by the metaphysics of infinite variation, which includes past and future variants of worlds, making time travel a fundamental aspect of its cosmology. Some international RPGs also delve into temporal themes. French editions of titles like Metabaron and certain versions of Kenshin and Kensai explore mythic cycles and rebirth across eras, including characters that shift between timelines without explicitly labeling it as time travel. Similarly, games like OVA and Tenra Bashro Zero utilize destiny threads for flashback scene insertions, enabling players to retroactively alter past events to explain sudden advantages in the present. So, there you have it, my friends. I hope you enjoy this delve into the deep lore of Dungeons & Dragons and other role-playing games. Give it a like, a share, subscribe if you care. Thanks for listening, and as always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.